There, I'm Atul, and I'm an online tutor based in East London right now.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm another online tutor. I'm based in Southwest London.
Fantastic. On this lovely sunny day, we are all staying in and doing our bit. So I'm very excited to have Catherine on here, someone I really respect and admire because of all the online tutors I've met, Catherine's one of the very few who tutors primary maths online with manipulatives, real and virtual ones. She also uses games, and all of these three things I've discovered are really, really good tools in teaching primary maths. Primary maths is actually because I teach pretty much all of it really from number bonds or even before number bonds, skip counting number bonds, key stage 2, 3, 4 up to A level, and teaching primary maths is intellectually very, very demanding. I like those who teach primary maths, hats off. I think we need a lot more respect for primary teachers in just the level of work we do. So that's why I'm really excited because Catherine does it extremely well. She does it online, and she yeah, uses a bunch of games. But before we get into that, just a very quick intro on where you're based, what you tutor, what levels you tutor as well. Yeah.
Yes, well, as I said, I'm based in Southwest London. I was tutoring a mixture of face-to-face and online, but now obviously it's all online. Um, I basically started off tutoring primary maths and primary English, but as I've done more tutoring, I'm more steering towards maths. I don't just teach primary, I actually teach all the way up to GCSE, but I focus mainly on children who are struggling with maths. So I've been particularly successful in children who are, well, students who are borderline 4 or 5 grade GCSE by using primary maths to help them go over the aspects of maths that they didn't understand for a very long time. So things like percentages or fractions. And they found it really useful to go right back to the beginning. And you can actually build up very quickly by taking them back to what they've actually understood. And that primary method has worked really successfully for a lot of the students, meaning that they've actually managed to pass their GCSE maths, whereas before they were going to fail it. And I use that with Key Stage 3 as well. So all my tutoring generally is based on a primary way of doing things with manipulatives, with games, taking things back to the starting point and building them back up slowly, because it's very easy to assume that they know a lot when actually it's very muddled and they don't. So by being able to take them all the way back actually makes a massive, massive difference. So I mainly teach maths now, and it's sort of from about 6 years up all the way up to about 14 is my sort of main group, and then I have the odd GCSE child.
Right. Yeah, that's a fantastic point actually, because we were chatting about that earlier as well. And it may be primary maths, but you can easily have that like at in year 11. So we might be doing. I've had tutees in year 11 that I'm doing number bonds with. So it's that, and you must be able to go back if you're a secondary tutor. You must be able to go back to the level where they were already good at, and then build up from there. And that naturally kind of a lot of times means doing primary maths the way it should be done with those children in the right way so that they can then make progress. And it's absolutely one of the most satisfying things I do for my tutoring, like dyscalculia, and that with older students who have essentially been switched off maths, maybe even sometimes like for a good 7, 8, 10 years, and then going back to where they were good at, and then just really gradually building. It's really one of the truly most intellectually demanding and satisfying things at the same time. And that's
Yeah,
what, yeah.
I find that a lot of the older children come with this idea that manipulatives are not for them, they're too babyish. But actually, when you get them out and they can see how it can make a difference, they suddenly understand something that they really struggled with for a long time, but never wanted to speak out because they feel like they should already know it. You're saying, well, I'm taking you right back to the beginning, and you're like, and then they think that you're going to take a long, long time on beginning stuff, but because you've then got that fundamental back in place, they can actually make really rapid progress because you just needed to fill in the odd gap that they were missing. It's not like they didn't understand anything. There's just key things that just make all the difference. And being able to take it back to an explanation that really resonates with them makes all the difference to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic, because Mark McCourt calls it bridging, and he says, like, children by even the age of 4 have come into the world, and by the time they're 4, they've experienced a lot of maths before. They've had parents saying half, more than, less than, equal. We have an innate sense of ordinality, cardinality. They will arrange rocks in an order of size. They know who came first, who came last. By the time they get to year 9, year 10, they've still learned a lot of maths. It might not connect with them, and what you do and what good tutors do is figure out where those missing pieces are, and like a Jenga tower, just connect them up. And sometimes they make very fast progress because that missing piece, there was only 3 or 4 of them. But we know if those pieces are missing, how hard it can be. So that's why it's so satisfying. Brilliant. So I'm just gonna move on straight to one of the things you're really, really good at doing, and the thing what we've been doing online. We've been making videos, so we've been connecting on screen for a while and in person, but we made a bunch of videos, and one thing that really, really impressed me, and I've learned quite a lot from you from that, is how to engage these children using games. Like, you gamify something and makes it so much more interesting that they're absolutely drawn to it. So maybe you can take us through some of your favorite games. Or
what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen to show you some examples. So hopefully you can see this. This is a really simple board game that I literally just copied and pasted off the internet, Snakes and Ladders. And all we do is we have 2 counters, and it may be a counter from the whiteboard. So we may just choose something really quite dull like squares, or often animals are quite popular. So one of us maybe is a dog, and we'll choose a particular coloured dog as one counter, and then as another counter, what colour would be good? Let's go.
So I could be the blue dog, and you could be the whatever dog you're making. So.
Whatever. I think today, maybe let's be a rabbit. And I always let the kids choose. If they're quite quick, they can just choose straight off the shapes themselves. Other times I just go to the internet. One kid I started working with last week is really into basketball. So we chose a basketball and a tennis ball. It really just depends. And then literally these are our counters. I'm just going to move them on to the start. And just depending on what it is that we're practicing, we'll use dice and we'll just randomly generate different questions. And the really good thing about the games is that I can tailor it exactly to the bit of practice that they need. So, for example, if we're practicing addition, but they're not at the stage where they can actually carry or do anything complicated, and just getting them to understand what are the 10s and what are the 1s, I can make sure that every single question is within that. Or we might be practicing multiples, but I can make sure that the multiples are never more than I know that they can do. So they get lots and lots of practice at that one little element before moving it on. And what's really good about it is that we don't know what numbers we're going to get. There's no worksheet in sight, yet they do a lot more maths than they realise, especially as they have to do every single one of my questions as well. So, for example, if I just move this, I have, for example, a 10-sided dice. So often we'll use the 10-sided dice, either an online one or a face-to-face one, and we'll literally just roll it. So one really simple game for children who are really struggling is just practicing number bonds to 10. So I'll roll the dice. I got a 5. I'll say to them, what's 5's best friend? Because we've already talked about the number bonds to 10 are best friends. And then the answer is the number of places that they move. So they're actually doing all the work. And the point of the game is that it's not who's better at maths that wins. It's just pure luck as to what you roll on the dice. So it's a fair mixture of them winning and myself winning. Because I really hate it when, if someone's better at something, they let me win because I know that they let me win. And that's not the same feeling as if you won because you really won. So that's stuck with me since childhood. So I always try to make sure that the games are based on luck, so that there's not sort of that question of, oh, I haven't really won, or it's a hollow win, or oh, she's better than me, there's no point me playing because I'll lose straight away.
Yeah.
I do have some children who actually cheat, so they will work out what they need to get to the next point. But I work on, well, they're still doing some maths to work out what they have to get there. So that's fine. I do question some of them. We go, wow, you managed to roll 7 6s in a row. That's quite impressive. But they say, it's really true. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just phenomenal pedagogy, like, because we often think, children at that age, you often think that maths is all about getting the right answer and doing some worksheets. But what you're telling them really, what by doing this is, it's the process that matters, like the process of figuring out what that number bound to 10 of that number that you randomly got, which makes it a fair game between you and them. It's a process that's really, really important. Like it's maths is not just about doing a bunch of worksheets, getting the right answer, who's doing it faster than someone else and getting it right. That's just much more to maths than that. And just look at this board, it's just vivid and colorful, and of course it engages them. I'm not surprised at all.
And I also, if they get the answer wrong, we still move. It's really, to be honest, the game is really just the motivation to practice, and they go for it every single time. I have another game that is really, really popular. Well, this is another game that I did, but as you can see on this one, so we've played it a few times, and we've got ice creams as our tokens here, but we adapted the game and coloured in some squares to change it to slightly different. So once we've done something, I just let them do whatever they like. As long as there's fair rules set up at the beginning, if it keeps them motivated, I'm quite happy. And then this one is a real favourite. Cops and Robbers. Who would have known that it would be so popular? And again, here we were doing 3-digit numbers. I think we were doing takeaway, but I would just have a virtual dice that randomly generated the numbers. Sometimes it's a very simple sum that comes out. Sometimes it's quite complicated. Again, doesn't matter if you get the answer wrong, you're still going to move, but we will work through how to do it. And for my turn, it will also be that they're doing my turn for me as well. And we'll talk about best ways to do it and things like that, so that there's a motivation there.
And this is great because like children are just used to seeing these fake maths made up questions. I mean, the maths is there, but the questions are like, Jack and Jill share 50 sweets in the ratio of, whoever shares 50 sweets in the ratio of 2 to 3. But this is an actual situation. There is a cop, there is a robber, and there's a game. It's much closer to the world, our world of just playing things with games. Is much more fun with the maths going as well.
I mean, I still do things like word problems. I think I've got one here. So for example, here's another one. This one came from Twinkle, and so it was practicing word problems. But again, rather than just have it as a whole worksheet, I just cut each question out separately, and then normally I would have it laid out on the floor, and they would just pick up whichever question they wanted to do. So this one I just had it all at the bottom, and they just had to randomly select. We would then put the question onto a new page, work through using models, discussing different things, and then we would roll a dice to see how far to move. So I adapt the games for how it will work. Sometimes it's part of the answer, sometimes we just roll a dice to decide on the movement. But again, it's just a lot more interesting and more motivating for them to answer word problems or any problems if it's cut up. They don't know how many they've got, and they will just keep going for a long, long time. I have one girl who's 12, nearly 13, and every maths lesson she's always like, we are going to do a game this week. And I've been teaching her for 2.5 years, and still every lesson she still wants to play a game. So, even slightly older children, it really works.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, obviously it's worksheet questions are necessary, and word problems and this rails, etc. They're all part and parcel. It's the right mix. with
Yeah.
but just like this thing, it's BitPaper when we use it, and that the flexibility you have it with it, you've turned a word problem into a card, really, a virtual card. So it's just
Yes.
a manipulative in some ways and a word problem at the same time, which makes it just makes it that much more interesting. It's got that kind of move that thing around. It's interactive.
Yeah. And just by letting the kids choose the question, they have a bit more of an element of control as well. And often I'll let them then roll the dice as well, so that they're the ones generating the random numbers. So it's a mixture of them doing it, I'm doing it, trusting that they're being truthful about what they're saying. But if they're not, it's not the end of the world, because the whole point is not really to win the game. It's just the motivation that's within there. And I find that by changing things into this sort of game process means that the kids who find maths really difficult, they want to try and they want to do well. And by trying, they do well, so they become more confident, and they forget that they find it hard, and they're just happy to have a go, because there's no right, wrong, oh, something's going to happen if I get it wrong, I better not try. They really like, oh, we're playing a game. I like playing games. And they're already much more relaxed. And then you can see what they can really do. And often they can surprise themselves that they can do it where they thought that they couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. So we've got, I forgot to mention, but we're live streaming on the Maths Tutors UK group, on my Facebook page, on my Twitter and my YouTube. So we're all over the internet, for better or for worse. We've got Paul from Liverpool, Carol from Guernsey. So if you've got any questions for either one of us, actually, just put them in any of these channels and we'll be happy to answer them live. That's one of the reasons why we like doing these live things. It's actually not just us talking. We could just make a video and record that, but it's about your interaction as well. Great. So maybe you can show us some of the manipulatives you use, either virtual or real. I know you use a whole bunch of them. So
yeah. So I use a mixture. So with some of the children, they actually have their own manipulatives. So what we do is, and I have mine. So here's my box of Cuisenaire rods, and they have their own. So I often combine the physical Cuisenaire rods with the virtual ones, because sometimes it's difficult to know whether the explanation of what's happening, they're following in doing it exactly. So by having it on the screen as well, they can just look to double check that we're both doing the same thing. Have a quick look and see if I've got an example. I'm not sure, actually. I think these are all other things. So this is an example of some online manipulatives. I actually have, one of my pupils has these actual manipulatives at home. I don't. But so she uses the manipulatives in front of her while she's doing the session, and I do exactly the same on the screen. And it's really successful because they're actually using the manipulatives to build their understanding, but they can also look at the screen to see what's going on the screen. And not only that, the parent can then look at the whiteboard afterwards to see the process that I've gone through with the child. So I sort of take duplicate pages with just the next stage, so that then the parent can work through with the child other questions using the same manipulatives. So, for example, last Tuesday, I had one child who was doing 4-digit subtraction, but with zeros in either the tens or the hundreds columns. So she was having to borrow from further along. She was perfectly happy just borrowing or exchanging, but when there was zeros, she was very confused. And this was the way that I showed her how to do it, and we talked about it. And she would physically hold like the 1,000 disc, and she would physically hold 10 hundreds, and we would talk about how they were the same. And so then she would put one of them away and put the others down, and then we talk about, now how many hundreds do you have, now how many tens, and so on. So she was actually physically doing it. And then the idea is, especially with all the parents having to help their children now, is that the parent can then look at what we've done, look at the diagrams, and actually follow through the same, because there's no guarantee that the child will remember everything when she comes to look at it maybe a day later. But if it's already there on the screen with the parent being able to follow through, between the two of them, they should be able to continue working on it.
Right. And since quite a lot of people don't use BitPaper in this way, or they don't even use BitPaper, so maybe you can just show them the two-way interactivity. I'll just move some of these counters, and you move them, and we can label.
Sure.
Label what they're doing. So I'm just gonna. How about you move some, and then I'll move some.
Yes. So maybe actually we've got a number here which is 5,314. So maybe you can create the 5,000 and I can create the 300.
Okay, so this is me now moving it.
So what I've done is I've cut out these counters, and then I've done multiple copies so that we can just drag and drop into the spaces rather than have to keep copying and pasting each time. And for the child, that's a lot simpler, because I also want to make it as simple and easy for them to use as possible. So this is me dragging the 300.
Well, that's good, because we can see when you drag it, we can, the select tool comes up. When I drag it, you don't see that, so you can see the difference.
So with this, the child would do it in front of them first, and then we would do it together, and then we would compare our answers to see, because I can't actually see what they've done unless they pick up their laptop and sort of turn it over. But by putting it on the screen, we're able to compare how many thousands have I got on the screen. Oh, there's 5,000. How many thousands do you have? 5,000. Are they the same? So we can talk about it in that way as well. So it's another way of just checking. So even if I do have the resources, I still try to put it on the screen as well, just to have that third level. And then it's also useful for parents.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, this canvas is basically an interactive canvas, isn't it? So that's what makes it so phenomenal, I think. What I've been trying to tell a lot of people who are just recently doing online tutoring and finding it to be scary or not as good as and all the other things is that teaching online is in itself a pedagogy. Like, you use the idea that we are remote as a powerful tool actually in itself, and this interactive canvas that exists, the screen that exists between me, you, and this in between is a learning tool in itself, and that's so much better than like sticking on the laptop and all that stuff you're saying. Okay, we're just getting Carol saying multiple disk for each place value. Love it. Carol's also asking, building visual memory, any tips on that? Not sure what that exactly means, but maybe you can elaborate, or I can ask her again.
Maybe she could give us a few more clues as what she's looking for.
Yeah, visual memory. Yeah, so if you can.
I mean, I think I do it more on, because they're actually doing their movements and everything, that helps them. If they were face to face with me, then that's what we would be doing. So it's trying to recreate the same experience. But I also find that because it's online, it forces the student to explain much more precisely and more clearly what it is they're doing. For example, they can't just say, well, I take one of them and I swap it for that, because I'm like, what have you taken? What have you swapped it? What do you mean? So it forces them, or they go, well, I just want to do this. And I'm like, what is this? So they have to then start going, oh, well, actually, I've taken 100, or I've taken this. So they learn to be a lot more specific. Whereas if they were in front of me, they're, well, I'm going to take one of those and swap it for that. I'd be like, oh, okay, because you can see, so you assume that they know what they're doing. Whereas actually here, you don't know necessarily what they're talking, so you've got to clarify it all the time.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal pedagogical shift, and I think it takes quite some time to learn that actually. I mean, I had to do that as well, and I'm seeing a lot of people going through that journey, but it's not to be taken lightly. And this is a phenomenal tool we have at our disposal, where because of the distance, because I'm not present in the physical realm with them, and they are more relaxed in their own space, I'm more relaxed in my own space, I just find more articulation comes out of students, but only if we ask them to articulate the right thing in the right way. And as obviously you've discovered how to do that, and they have to articulate, because I can't see their manipulatives. I can't. No, that's a good thing. I can't see it because I can choose. I can ask them to show it to me. I can ask them to show, but I can on purpose say, actually, what do you mean? What's there? What's there? Can you tell me? Can you tell me what that really means? Tell me what you see. Is one of my key phrases. I just say,
Yeah.
tell me what you see. What do you see there on the screen? Tell me what you see. What's happened? And you get phenomenal revelations that you wouldn't have thought of because they're thinking something completely different to what you thought.
Exactly. And because you can't see them, you can't just assume that they're thinking what you're thinking. So that questioning actually has often revealed a lot more about what they've misunderstood and their misconception that I think if they were face to face with me, I probably wouldn't have picked up. I can't think of any specific examples right now, but there's been a few times where I'm like, oh, that's what they're thinking. I would never have realized that. And then from that moment you go, okay, so this is what I need to do to address that, to then get them back on track, so to speak. And it's only because I've sort of questioned, well, what exactly do you mean? What have you got in front of you? Which bit are you talking about? That they've actually then had to be really specific. And then you realize what it is that they haven't quite understood.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I'm going to show another manipulative now. So I really, really rate this site because for fractions, it's absolutely fantastic. Probably about 3 weeks ago, I had a year 3 child come to me and say that they've been doing addition of fractions and she just didn't get it. And literally by using this one tool, I think she didn't even know, for example, what 2/3 were. So she had something like 2/3 plus 1/3. So it was still with the same denominator. But she was like, she didn't really know what 2/3 were. So she was trying to decide the 2/3 was probably this, and then she was just going to do something like this. But by using this tool and asking her to select what she thought it was, revealed straight away that she had no concept of what 2/3 meant, where you probably would have just sort of face to face would have put it out in front of her and gone, you know, as soon as she was going to something not correct, you would have stopped her straight away rather than revealed straight away, let her go with it and see what happened. And then we talked about what the denominator was. And then as soon as I showed her, for example, well, this is 2/3, she then went, I get how to add fractions. And then she could do it straight away, even without going any further, because it wasn't the adding that was the issue. She just didn't understand the concept of what something like 2/3 meant. But by using this, which is a really powerful tool, it just told her I didn't need to tell her anything or explain anything. She just could see it for herself. And I often allow children to just play with this when we first start fractions, because they discover so much on their own, and then we'll sort of guide them. Can you find anything that's sort of the same as a half, or what else could you put here? And they start forming their own ideas, which are mathematically correct, and then we go into the maths after that. But that giving them that chance of exploration, and with the tile so clear that the whole tile is a whole, they see it very, very clearly and very, very quickly. And then from there, what I will do is whatever work they've done, I will then copy and paste onto the whiteboard. I don't know if I've got any examples on here actually, but we just copy and paste onto the whiteboard, and then they can see it again for future reference. So if we're adding fractions, we do a few, put it up on the whiteboard so we can see, so that maybe the next time we can use the visuals to just jog our memory. So that's another one that I use frequently. And my other really, really well rated online manipulative is this Polypad. So again, this one has fractions and things, but I prefer the other one. But this one is fantastic for showing negative numbers and zero pairs and the algebra. And the reason that I really like this one is because it's very clear to set up equations and things like that. But also, if you've got negatives and positives, if you put them on top of each other, they will grey out. So that actually it's another visual reminder of, oh, positive and a negative will create a zero pair, and they can see it, and the children will literally drag from one side to the other, drag over to show what they're doing. So you can mimic everything that you're doing with the algebra tiles that I have, but actually by the two actually going into grey, it makes that even more clear, which you can't do with the algebra tiles. It's more like, okay, and we'll just put them away, whereas here they're still there, so you can still physically see them. And I think that's really powerful for children that are struggling with that concept of the zero pairs. When they actually still see it on the screen, it's like, it's still there.
I think so, both me and you do this to quite an extent, but when I initially started online, I thought, well, real manipulatives are the best because they're real, and virtual manipulatives are like a second best because they're not real. But actually what we're both now doing is we're using a mixture of the two as and when appropriate, and you actually use them together and you get like the sum of the parts. In this case, learning is actually it's much better. So like this is a very sophisticated online manipulative because you can see the zero pair disappearing but not disappearing, which you can't do with a real thing. I mean, I've had some children join up discs and throw the zero pair away, which is
but it's not quite, but then you're like throwing it away, which doesn't quite work.
Exactly. And so here it's
but
there.
this just seems to really click in their brain, and I think there are some manipulatives that work really well physically, and I think there's some that actually are better online, and just I'm quite selective over which manipulatives I use. So I know there's thousands out there, but I have my couple of go-to websites that I use. So even though other website or this one has the fractions, I don't use it. I use the other one for the fractions. So I'm very careful about which manipulatives I use and whether they sort of achieve what I'm trying to achieve with the child. And other times I will literally get my camera and a visualizer and show it in front, because that's actually the better way. So it really just depends on what I want the child to understand and learn, and what's the best method for it. And you have all these different tools, and I just select the one I think is the best for it. And if one doesn't work, I'll move to another.
And just to tell everyone, that's a lot of people are using visualizers to teach using handwriting actually, but I've never used it for handwriting. I just use BitPaper, which is the way for me to do it. But yeah, of course, that's what Catherine's saying. You can have a real manipulative and a visualizer, and they can have their own real manipulative. So as and when necessary, you can switch between real. It's a pedagogic choice between each individual tutee, where they are in their journey, how you think they'll learn. These are all, but you have the choice to use this algebra tiles here or a math spot one, or you can make one on BitPaper. It just depends on what you think is suited to a child. Just looking at some more questions. Carol said about her earlier question, identifying which modality is weak or strong is, in this case, a student has weak visual perception, processing, memory. So yeah, okay, so which, I think, modality, concrete picture, abstract. Good question. I suppose my answer to that is the whole thing is interconnected. So it may be that they need to do concrete and picture. It's not a linear thing. So it may that they might be in year 11 and algebra tiles would be useful to kind of consolidate something. And it's not, ideally you want to fade concrete and visuals for abstract, but you can actually bring manipulators on at any stage in the journey just to give another perspective on the same concept.
I think what I do is I will, depending on the child and what we're working on, we'll often start with a manipulative, particularly if, I mean, I do have a few students who are really gifted and they just pick things up straight away, and they really don't need manipulatives because that's just the way their brain works. But even with them, I will use them. For example, one child, I used the Cuisineiros to understand division word problems because he was struggling with it. He knew how to do it mathematically, but didn't really know what was going on. So we actually and they happen to have Cuisinart, so we actually use Cuisinart to go through that, to build on that understanding. But the majority of children will start with the manipulatives, but then we'll do the manipulatives alongside more formal written work so that they can see how the two link, rather than we've done the manipulatives, now we're doing it this way. It's much more, this is to help you understand how the link is and gradually move away. But things like algebra tiles, I would still encourage them if they're finding it difficult. I have students who basically they start visualizing it in their head. So they're actually doing it in their head before they're writing it down the abstract ways, because they've done it so many times. It's like one child, basically any question that's multiplying or dividing by a multiple, like by 10 or 100 or 1,000, he's there, he closes his eyes and he's visualizing inside his head the place value chart, and he's physically inside his mind moving the correct number of places. So he doesn't need the manipulatives anymore, but he's actually doing the same process, and then he will just say the answer. So he can picture things in his head very clearly and just do that. Others will draw the place value chart out even when they're 14, 15, because it will guarantee they get the correct answer. So it just depends on how the child works, as in what works best for them.
Yeah, and that's a great thing we can do as tutors. We can identify what stage they're at, when to introduce what the right manipulative is, what they've done with the manipulatives. They can imagine it in their head, or they have got enough fluency that they don't need that manipulative. But yeah, these are all choices depending, and you do them in tandem sometimes. So, or there's the abstract version, there's a picture version, there's a concrete version. So when you're using the virtual manipulatives and the real ones together and doing written work, you've got these three modalities working simultaneously, and language, because you're talking in language all the time, mathematical language. So it's not a linear thing. It's like all of these things are kind of interconnected, and there's a great map that Mark McCourt has of all of these things interconnect. I can post that on the group as well. I think Paul's got a question. Does the tutor control the screen and the pupil use the physical manipulatives depending on what site you're using? On BitPaper, both tutor and tutee can move the virtual manipulative on the canvas.
On these two sites, I have to give remote control to the student, and then they will do it. Most of the time I will give remote control and let them do it, because I think they gain much more for having that independence of choosing what to do, and we talk about it. Occasionally if they're on an iPad or something they can't, and then it will be much more of a demonstration. But that's a rare occasion rather than that's my go-to. My go-to is let them do it. I only do something different if they can't do that for any reason.
Of course, yeah. On Zoom,
the lag, because there is also when they remote control, there is a lag, but it is a little bit annoying and it's a little bit harder to control. But we just put up with it because the benefits of it outweigh the issues. The other option would be for the child to get the website up and then them share screen with me, and I have done that a few times, but I prefer it this way because I have a bit more control, and this is my go-to way most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I did a live stream with Caroline, and we talked about remote control. It's a very, very useful tool on Zoom. Basically, remote control means that then the tutee can move stuff on your computer via remote control connection to yours, and then obviously you can move down. So you get this two-way interactivity with a bit of lag, but by some management, it works out pretty well. I do that sometimes as well. Brilliant. Yeah, so I've actually got a dance class in about 5 minutes, so for that purpose I'm gonna start wrapping up this session.
Just before we finish, we should just demonstrate a tops trump game, how we do top trumps.
Brilliant. Yeah, we should definitely do that. So maybe out of screen share, or you want to still say screen share?
Oh yeah, shall I stop screen sharing?
Yeah.
Okay. So we both have the same pack of top trumps cards. This one happens to be Predators. And at the moment I'm playing Minecraft top trumps with one of my tutees over in America. So basically whatever they're interested in, I get a pack of top trumps cards. And and then we use them for all sorts of maths games.
Yeah, they're fantastic, and I think we've kind of both evolved this technology, because I knew that you were doing them in person with your tutees already, and this is a phenomenon manipulative. Like I've got a chemistry one which has industrial chemistry, something about the element, something about the cost, something like the atom's diameter, and I'm using these with 7, 8 year olds. So like they're learning like fairly advanced chemistry at that age, but it's just holding them. And like when I first spoke with Catherine, I kind of went back and I thought, oh, I used to love top drums as like a child. Like I kind of grew out of them at about 12 when I was onto like fighter aeroplanes, and I just played them all the time. And every top drum has a whole bunch of numbers in them, numerals, and this one we use has like small ones and large ones. You can go up to 10, up to 20, up to 200, 300, whatever, and you can use that for comparative work.
We use them for addition, subtraction. I've used them for multiplication. There's so many different ways that you can use them. The Minecraft one also has decimals in it, so I use the Minecraft one to compare decimals. Some of them have just tenths, others have tenths and hundredths. So we just selected the ones we were going to use depending on where we got with our learning.
Right.
I think we should maybe we'll just do a comparison one just to finish.
Yeah, sure. All right. It's okay. What are we
What
comparing?
are we going to compare?
Let's go risk of encounter.
Okay,
All
you
right.
can lead.
Okay. I'll literally, to keep it random, I'll just pluck it out of my top. I have got this polar bear. Risk of encounter 1.
Oh, I've got Jaguar, risk of encounter 4. So then from
Excellent.
there we would like compare the numbers, decide who won, maybe write the numbers down, use some math to show, depending on what the child is doing. But it's such a good way of keeping them enthusiastic and engaged while practicing, particularly for children who with dyscalculia, because it's so hard for them just to do some very basic maths, that it gives them the motivation to keep working. And I think when you find maths really, really difficult, anything that will help you carry on being motivated is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole gamifying element is, with knowing that it's still a part of a serious pedagogy and they're learning other stuff, but it gets that engagement, and you're doing maths. Yeah, it's fantastic. So we produced a whole bunch of videos. We are still producing them. Before all of this happened, we were slowly
Yeah.
looking at them. So we've got a YouTube channel. I've got one where we produce them. So I'll put a link up. Check that out. We've got a bunch of top trump games. Got some other ones, and we'll keep doing them. So if you've got any more questions, this recording will be there anyway. So just put some questions on the Facebook group or on the Twitter, wherever you are, and we'll try and answer them. Connect with us. It's all about connecting with other tutors. I learned loads from Catherine. I learned loads from other online tutors. I'm always learning. Like I'm absorbing stuff. And this is a community. It's about you connecting to others. Yes, it's lockdown, but we've been doing this as online tutors, connecting with each other online. It's a very powerful medium for quite some time. So we all use this opportunity to connect with each other online and make us better tutors, find some friends, and so on. Yeah. So thanks for the time, Catherine, and
Oh, you're welcome, and happy Easter, everyone.
yes, yeah, happy Easter. All right, we'll do another live stream soon. All right, I'll
Perfect.
stop streaming now.
Bye.
Bye all.